So welcome to the Accelerated Learning Toolkit Facilitated Conversation. My name's Erica Caruter. I work out of Patton Central. I work on the School Psychology Initiative as statewide lead. I also work on mathematics, supporting MTSS for mathematics. Also a PBIS facilitator on the Learning Environment and Engagement Initiative and do a little bit of work on that. I'm also on a track Prepare Retain. We were joking about Halloween as the kids come by. We said, I want to talk to you about a career in education. But anyway, one of my other jobs is I work with Amy Healy and with Carol Clancy as statewide leads for one of the PDE initiatives, Accelerated Learning. And so we wanted to provide an opportunity for folks to learn a little bit more about accelerated learning and the toolkit in there. So I'm going to have Amy and Karen introduce themselves before we get into the toolkit, if that's all right.
Good morning. I'm Amy Healy. I am the Training and Consultation Supervisor at the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. And as Erica said, I'm also one of the statewide leads for the IU statewide leads for Accelerated Learning Scaffolded Supports.
Thanks, Amy. Good morning. I'm Karen Deary from Patton Central. So I work out of the same office as Erica. I lead for Patton the School Improvement Initiative, so I'm seeing some familiar faces from our session yesterday. So I'm anxious to continue this conversation with you. Can I just ask the four of you? So I know you're from Susquehanna. And you guys are in school improvement for your English learners at this point. Okay. And sitting next to you, are you together? From the same, okay, same school. How about in the back? Who do we have?
I'm from State College.
From State College. And are you guys in school improvement for anything?
I
don't think so.
I have no idea what Accelerated Learning Toolkit. I have no idea what this is.
Perfect.
Perfect. I'm here to learn.
So new. No, that's good.
I don't think we're in school improvement.
I don't think so either. And the only reason I'm asking is because that will gauge how I run then part of this. So just so I know who I'm targeting. And you're from Reading, so you guys do have some schools that are in school improvement that you may or may not be aware of, but okay. And just joining us, can you just tell me where you're from? And
Stephen Coots from Wellsboro Area School District. We have no schools on improvement.
You don't, right now.
I just didn't like what I chose for my first session.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you.
I want to see where there was room.
Yeah, no, we're happy to have you here. So we'll talk. Good. So we have some locals. Kelly's from Lock Haven. I'm originally from Williamsport, family in Wellsboro. So welcome. Yeah, no. It's nice to see people from home. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Caruto to get us started.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we do have a small enough group that we can kind of keep things a little bit informal. So please feel free, if we are recording this session, if you have questions, we'll either repeat it if it's a quick question or if it's a little bit longer and you want to share, we'll make sure that we run a mic to you so that it picks up well on the recording. We are going to have a facilitator guide available for this. So if this is something that maybe as you go back to your districts or your LEAs, you can utilize this. So the first things first, we have a code. If you have your device with you, you are welcome to scan. I'm going to take you out to that resource in a little bit. But I'm going to kind of get us started with some of the resources with accelerated learning. So a little bit of background. After schools reopened in 2021, one of the priorities of PDE became how do we account for and how do we support students and schools and educators and families with the disruptions in education? How do we essentially accelerate learning? So some people refer to it as learning loss. I don't like that title. The reason I don't is because it puts the onus on the child, and it really is a systems issue. So, we look at it as accelerated learning. What are some of those highest impact strategies that we can utilize that help close gaps at a faster rate than typical? Okay. So when you scan that, you'll be able to see the full toolkit. We're going to go through that and the different strategies and unpack those today. So Amy and I, there are a number of different things within the Accelerated Learning Toolkit. This session, Amy and I are going to focus on scaffolded supports. Although it's not formally called MTSS in this, you'll notice there are a lot of MTSS-like elements. So there are a number of sessions within this that have been recorded before, and a number of resources to help with that. So we're gonna get started. So there is the PDE roadmap, and the newest stop on the PDE roadmap, or one of the newest stops, is accelerated learning, and we're gonna talk about scaffolded supports. So there are a number of things that we want to consider as we are working to support all students with regard to those lost instructional opportunities. And I'm going to pop out here to the toolkit. Okay, so here's the roadmap. And you can see here accelerated learning through an integrated system of support. And this was rolled out, I was going to say, could maybe Kelly or someone grab the door? Thank you. This became a priority in 2021, and we know all schools were in different places at that time with regard to some schools closed totally. Students didn't have any instruction for a period of time. Other schools were closed. Maybe students got like packets. Other schools were closed. Maybe students had online learning opportunities or live Zooms with teachers. So there were a lot of different things that happened. And one of the things noticed was that not all students had equal opportunity and access. And how do we help school systems get back on track? So during the 21-22 school year, there were teams of individuals who, from Patton, from the intermediate units, from the Department of Education, worked together to pull those highest leverage practices that we could kind of find from the research to help schools help students make up for those missed learning opportunities. So to offer supports, there's the new phase of the PDE roadmap, accelerated learning through an integrated system of support. So it is like a systematic process and technical support for school communities to help with all of those activities. So I'm going to click now to the Accelerated Learning Toolkit here, and it's an 80-page document, and that QR code that you scanned will be able to get you to get to this resource. So sorry for my wild scrolling. So within the accelerated learning system, there are a number of different components, and high quality academics, supportive learning environments. Karen is going to talk a little bit about healthy systems condition. And Amy and I, you notice there's a little pyramid in here for those of you who know MTSS, right? We have the MTSS period. We aren't calling it MTSS, but essentially it is a continuum of evidence-based academic, behavioral, social, and emotional supports aligned with student needs. And we were asked to design this, so there were large teams of folks that designed this behind the scenes to be able to support schools. And we were asked to kind of keep things, because schools, as we know, everyone is so busy, understaffed, to keep things kind of at a glance easy to read, and then so people could kind of explore and pick those key activities that most aligned with their district needs. So in the guide, it talks about there's like a little worth it on a little mountain with a flag that talks about the usefulness, the advantage of the strategy. There's some key actions then as you think about, is this a strategy, as you explore that we need to take to integrate that in. Then within each of the components, there are tools. So some high quality resources from researchers, from experts in those areas. And then there are little mini professional learning modules that provide a little bit of an overview of that. So you can go through the toolkit. I'm going to go ahead to scaffolded supports. Amy's going to unpack it a little bit more in depth. But you can see the different components in that. And as you think about an MTSS, you're like, oh, okay, so these are little excerpts from MTSS. So things like foundational supports, essentially tier 1 and core, explicit instruction. Then there's another component within scaffolded supports, universal or core landscape, that incorporates some of the principles of universal design or UDL. Class-wide supports, thinking about when you have a class of students for whom the median student or most students are below where they need to be on that particular skill. So maybe like after a universal screening, that middle student in the class, their performance is below a risk criterion. We talk about essentially some options for class-wide intervention. Strategic and intensive supports, you can kind of make the connections with those with like tier 2 and tier 3, intensifying those supports beyond class-wide. There's another component, additional accelerating opportunities. So just real brief, what this is maybe some schools had like summer learning camps. Maybe there is intensive tutoring on a particular subject in addition to the regular school day. Then there is another component, supporting students with significant learning and behavioral needs. So thinking about, for example, students maybe who have autism and need more intensive needs. They might have complex academic as well as co-occurring behavioral needs. And then finally, supporting gifted students also falls within scaffolded supports. So I'm going to kind of scroll down a little bit. Sorry again for my wild scrolling, just so you can. I'll just model one a little bit for you, but we're going to get into those in a little bit more depth here. All right, so scaffolded support starts on page 52, and those are kind of elements that go into an MTSS, but as you'll notice, they're really succinct, and it's not the typical reading and slides and things that you would see about MTSS. So it kind of goes through worth it, what are those key actions. It's in a nice checklist format. And one of the reasons for that was to try and make it easy for schools to think about installation as well as what they need to be able to do to support that. And then after each section, there are a ton, and the links are embedded, that are related to those different components of scaffolded supports. So that's the toolkit, and I'm just going to show you a little bit more as you get out there on the website. There were also little short videos. So these might be things that you consider using in professional development or watching with your administrative team. So there's a little webinar series, and all of the webinars are recorded. So I'm going to go as in scaffolded supports, I'm going to go in there. And then you can see, an overview, the presentations. So each one, there's like all the videos are pretty short. Sorry, there's always ads. I don't have sound, so no thanks. Skip ad. All right. So you can see like this is class-wide. They're all about anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes in length. So it's a short watch, and it kind of takes all of those different components, but there's a video for all of the areas within the accelerated learning work. So those are all there for you to watch, and then if you want a PDF of it, And then there also is a PDF available in there for you. So I think it's a little bit of an underutilized resource, but all of that information is on the landing page for you on the roadmap. So I'm going to pause there before we get in a little bit more depth. Any questions or anything thus far? Okay, so some of you worked with Karen. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Deary, who works on a different part of the, oh, and let me show, sorry, I forgot to show you this. The full, another resource on here. My apologies. I know you're like, I'm going to stand up. Now she told me to sit down. I know. I wanted to show you this as well. So, there also is, to try and help bring these strategies to life, we sometimes meet and talk about things. There are planning templates that you can pull in here as you sit down and think about areas of need for your LEA, for your school. And there's a committee talking about purpose, looking at your data, noticing what are those challenges. So we've had some time to get universal screening data, to get some PSSA and keystones in. Your data can help you kind of match where you need some supports. And then you can set some goals, some targets. You can pick your strategy and then align a measurable goal with that to determine what are those action steps that you need to be able to do. It comes with an action plan. How are you going to monitor? How's the school team going to monitor what they said they were going to do? That resource is built in there for you as well. So we really tried to make it a one-stop shop. Just getting a little bit of time in there navigating the website can be helpful. So from the toolkit, then into the strategies, which we'll unpack a little bit more this morning, the videos, the handouts for it, and then finally the action planning document. And now this time, I promise, Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So if I'm a PowerPoint version, did my links carry over? Do you think?
Probably. If not, I have Google up behind it. I can get it up. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, good morning. So what I'm going to take you through is another section of that toolkit, which is called the Establishing Healthy Systems Conditions. Before we can do any of that work, so even yesterday, for those of you who were with me yesterday morning and we talked about the focus on high quality instruction, before we even get there, we have to make sure that we have systems in place that are going to support that. So we had conversations sort of about that after the session yesterday. And I was just on, so those of you who were in my session yesterday, I mentioned a book. I had book study this morning, getting ready for this. And we were talking about the same thing, like building those leadership teams and garnering that administrative support. Because without that and these systems in place, the instruction is going to be mismatched. It's not going to be aligned. It's going to be kind of piecemealed together. Teachers are going to do what they know to do, or what they can find on any given, Teachers Pay Teachers and sites like that we don't know if there's evidence behind all of those strategies. And I shared with people yesterday, my new favorite term is the Crayola curriculum. So how much time are we spending coloring? But is that really evidence-based instructional practices aligned to how we're going to teach kids to read? So those kinds of things. So all of that to say, I'm going to talk to you about what goes into establishing that healthy system and having those conditions in place. The one thing that we, let me follow my presentation. I always tend to go off track. So there are sort of four components. The first one is engagement. So we're going to talk about the teams that we put together and who are the stakeholders that we want to make sure we engage in these decision-making processes that we put into place. And it's probably more vast than what we typically think of and than what you're seeing in your own settings and in your own context. The other one is looking at technology and how we're using that. And again, recall that this toolkit came about as we're trying to accelerate the learning of those students who were in different sorts of learning environments as a result of the pandemic. So really looking at what technology do we have and how is it being used and how is it being allocated for our students. The third piece is staffing. We could spend a whole, day, week, month talking about staffing and the challenges around that we've been encountering over the past couple of years, and it's going to continue into the future. But that's all kind of I'm going to say about staffing at this point. And then also looking at scheduling and what do our daily schedules look like? What do our master building schedules look like? And kind of connected back with staffing, like, are we utilizing our staff in the most effective and efficient ways? And are we deploying them in a ways that provides the optimal sort of experiences and educational opportunities for students? All of that then has to be managed. We have to monitor it. We have to reflect on it. We have to know what's happening. We have to know what the impact is. So we have, are the structures that we're putting in place having the positive impact in getting us the outcomes that we're expecting and that we want? So how are we managing that and monitoring that over time? So I have, there are handouts on the chairs. It's just a one-page handout. Kelly, would you mind? I don't know if two people in the back may not have them. Thank you. So this is a cycle of continuous improvement that was adopted by Pennsylvania when we were putting together the system under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and how we're responding to the needs that are being, highlighted for our students. It's going to look similar to any other continuous improvement cycle that you've seen. So one that's very common that people are often familiar with is a PDSA, which is Plan, Do, Study, Act. So ours essentially follows that same, but we have a couple of additional steps because we felt like we needed to break some of those down into more detailed parts. So this is what I'm going to take you through today. All of our schools that are designated for school improvement. So we have 3 designations. CSI is the most intensive designation. It's a school-wide designation, and it stands for Comprehensive Support and Improvement. So our schools that are designated for CSI are receiving very targeted and frequent support from a school improvement facilitator who's working them through this cycle. The sort of middle level of that, it's a little bit less intensive, is called ATSI, and that stands for Additional Targeted Support and Improvement. So our ATSI designated schools are also receiving targeted support, and they have a certain number of hours that they receive from a school improvement facilitator as well. Those facilitators are IU employees, so they're coming from your local IU. So I know Amy helps us in the capital area IU15 region, along with some of her colleagues at IU15 and whatnot. So these are intermediate unit employees that are coming and working as school improvements facilitators to help our ATSI schools identify challenges and priorities and making a plan for how they're going to improve. And then the least intensive level is TSI, and that's Targeted Support and Improvement. These schools are also required to follow the same cycle. Assess their needs, build a plan, monitor their plan, and whatnot. They're not receiving direct support from a school improvement facilitator unless they're requesting that, which is, and a lot of our schools are as we move through this. We're in about our 4th year of implementation, and what we're seeing is the targeted support that schools are receiving is making an impact, and we do have some schools that are able to exit their school improvement status because they're following this cycle. The cycle is not only intended for those schools that are formally designated for needing school improvement. This is a cycle that's going to work for improvement at any level. So even our highest performing schools, for example, are going to benefit from working through this comprehensive cycle of what can we do to improve our practices and our context for our students, right? We always want to make those improvements. We always want to know if there are gaps in our systems and what we're doing, and how we can adjust to make those opportunities even better for all of our kids. So this is the cycle that we're going to work through and talk about today. So because this is a facilitated conversation, this is the point now where I'm going to ask you guys to really open up and just kind of give your perspectives and your thoughts, regardless, again, of any kind of status or whether you've seen this cycle or been involved in this cycle in the past. So right now, to start out, I want you to think of a problem of practice that is evident in your setting. So for our designated schools, that's been pointed out for them. They received a letter, in case you don't know or you haven't seen it. Designated schools receive a letter that says, hey, you're in this level of designation and you're being designated for these reasons. And academically, it could be because of proficiency in growth in math and English language arts. It can be for attendance. It can be for graduation. It can be for career standards benchmarks. It can be for the progress of your English learners and their acquisition of English. And again, the CSI designation is school-wide, so the whole school building needs the support. ATSI and TSI designations are made based on student subgroups. So it could be for your students with disabilities. It could be for your students who are economically disadvantaged, that group. It could be for your English learner group. It could be for a racial ethnic group. So it could be for your Hispanic subgroup or your Black student subgroup. So think about an area right now that you can identify is maybe a challenge that your school is working on to overcome. And again, the most common ones, so we won't get up and move, but when I was hanging up posters, thinking about note-taking, the most common ones that people are coming up with are attendance, graduation, reading, proficiency, and math. That's kind of what we're seeing in the plans. Okay. So is there anybody who'd be willing to share what you're thinking could be a challenge or a problem of practice in your school? No. Okay, so let's go ahead and come from, are you comfortable? Yeah, go ahead.
Question?
Yeah.
So where do you find these, like, what's the criteria for a school being put in an improvement plan?
Okay, so the question is, what are the criteria for a school being put in an improvement plan, and where can you find this? I might as well, yeah. I can just take you out and show you that. Now is, let me get, okay, so I'm going to stay on, you know what, I'm going to open a new, you know, when you're on somebody else's computer and they don't have your same bookmarks, you'll give me some flexibility and grace in that. So I just Googled PDE school improvement, and it's going to take me to the school improvement and accountability page on our PDE website. So under here, you can see those categories that I just described, the comprehensive, the additional, and the targeted support and improvement. At the bottom of that, you can find a list of those schools that are in school improvement. So CSI schools and ATSI schools are designated in a 3-year cycle. The most recent one was just this fall of 2022. The CSI and new CSI and ATSI schools were designated. Targeted school improvement, the TSI schools are an annual designation, so that's made every year. Those designations for this current year will be coming in the next maybe 2 months. They usually come out like December, January. So you can look for those. But anything that you would want to see to find out how schools are designated and what the criteria are or whatnot, you can find in this right-hand menu. There's all kinds of links that will help you. So it'll take you to our Pennsylvania's ESSA plan, and you can find the calculations and the designation status in there as well.
So is it based on like PSSAs? That's like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So designation, yep. So
High
the
level, how do you figure that out?
Yeah, so high level is, yes, because the calculations are, so high level, yeah. So they're looking at the state standard assessment. So they're looking at PSSAs and PASA, so your students who might be who are eligible for PASA as well, and the Keystone exams. So they're using all of that data to look at achievement. PVOS data and whatnot to look at growth. And then they're looking at chronic absenteeism or regular attendance, and graduation rates, 4 and 5 year cohort graduation rates. They'll also, again, they're looking at your progress of your English language learners and their acquisition of language. The other indicator, the career standards, benchmarks, indicators. So all of that would be in here. And again, if I can look up some of this stuff when I can get back to my computer and get more quickly without making you guys watch me fumble through. Yeah.
Do you really have any schools or districts on either of these that because of career work standards?
Say that. So any schools that are
I haven't seen any that were on due to career work standards.
because of career and work standards.
That one doesn't put you on.
So it would take a combination, and again, I can pull up when I can find them the cuts that give you,
Okay.
yeah, and we can take a look at that. I have those more accessible on my computer. Okay. Let me go back out here. Okay, so let's just, as we work through this, let's just think about attendance, for example. So that's going to be our common problem of practice that we're going to work through. So let's say we're designated for our attendance rates and we want to increase those. The first thing that we're going to do when we start to invest and engage in this cycle, this continuous cycle of improvement, is start up here at the set section. I first have to sort of set or get ready to do this work. And one of the things I have to do is think about who am I going to bring into my steering committee, my primary team, okay, to help do this work. So just throw out some ideas. When you're putting together an implementation team or you're putting together a leadership team at your site, who are the people that you're bringing in as part of that team? Give me just like roles of people. Who's usually on those teams at your buildings or in your district?
Teachers.
Okay, teachers, administration.
You should have some form of parent.
You should have some form of parent.
With attendance in high school, you let it have a high school student and not a high flyer.
High school student.
I shouldn't have said that way.
Okay. You're among friends.
Well, it'd be better to have the students that are having trouble. Special education,
Special education.
counselor,
Counselors.
psychologist,
Psychologists.
Maybe the attendance secretary.
Attendance secretary.
truancy officer.
Truancy officers if you have one. Mhm. Yeah, so when we're thinking about that, we want to make sure that we have a committee that has access to the data and the information that they need to be able to make these decisions about attendance. So who are those people in your context? It needs to be a diverse group of people. So under Title I requirements, if you're receiving Title I funds, or under school improvement requirements, if you're doing, if you're a part of that, there is a specified list of stakeholders that must be included on those steering committee teams. And it is all of those people that you guys named. So there is teacher representation, and especially if you're thinking about your students with disabilities, you want to make sure that you have general education and special education represented in some way. Obviously, you want administrators, so you want building administrators there. You also want district administrators as part of your team. So you want a shared and collaborative vision of leadership. So we don't want, just LEA leaders who are making blanket decisions necessarily in some cases for a whole district, especially for some of our larger districts and our more diverse districts. Where there do need to be local decisions made that are going to be specific to that context. So we're looking at a group of people who have a shared vision. So we're going to set that vision for our LEA, for our school, and for our team. Again, we want the diversity from the community that's represented by the students in our school. So in addition to the family member that was mentioned, especially at the secondary level, the high school student as well, who can give that perspective. And then we're also looking for community partners. So whether they are people who are in, the local businesses, people who are in the medical field, our doctors and dentists and those people, agency representatives, if we have a lot of agency support and we have a lot of services, especially coming into our schools, we want to make sure that we have all of those different perspectives that can feed into the decisions that we make, so that we're making a most appropriate and best laid decisions for the diverse community of students that we have. You want to set up, obviously, that some way to communicate what the decisions are that you're making. So you want to have some way to communicate to your local community, to your students, to your staff, and your families and whatnot, what's happening. You want that to be as transparent as possible. Okay. So looking at, again, I don't think there's anybody here who we haven't mentioned. You guys did a good job of hitting everybody that should be included in those stakeholder groups. Go ahead.
Forgot to say board member.
And a board member. So, and that's a great addition. We do have a lot of our schools, and when we're seeing their plans come through, whether they're Title I or school improvement, that they are starting to include their board members.
They have to be board approved. You really want to be starting.
And that's such an important point to make, because the plans do have to be board approved. The plans that are required to be submitted do have to go to board, and they do have to be approved. And you don't want that to just be, 3 PowerPoint slides that say, here's our plan. Does everybody think it's good? Everybody thinks it's good. They all vote 9-0, and then it comes through. And then they, asking questions later when they don't understand the plan. Yeah. Okay. So again, some people who we sometimes don't think about is those elected officials, so board members and others. Are there other sorts of, again, agencies that we should be including in these steering teams? Are there advocacy organizations in our areas that we should be including as part of the steering committee? And whether or not they're attending all of these meetings, but at least we're getting that perspective, and we're getting and hearing their voice. Okay. And our early learning leaders. So we're involved in a grant right now, a federal grant from the Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, called SPELL, and it stands for Success for PA Early Learners. And what our focus is, typically these grants, these OSEP grants, are a 5-year cycle. Pennsylvania has a strong history of implementing and receiving these grants. And typically they're looking at our school age population. So the first grant I was involved with years ago was looking at our students with the most significant cognitive needs and how we get grade level standards to those students. This last grant was looking at decreasing the likelihood of dropout in our middle school students. So we were targeting students who have an emotional disturbance identification and helping to prevent the likelihood of future dropout for them. Our current grant is looking at how do we transition kids from the preschool early learning centers into school age with the prerequisite skills for reading that will help increase, again, their acquisition of reading skills in grades K through 2. So looking at how can we involve our early learning centers in the decisions that we're making for school age, so that we can have a more consistent, transition and over the span of programs. So some ways to do that, again, if we don't have all of these people, right? Because when you get a team that gets to be too large, then it's just too much, like when you have all these people together. But in order to make sure that we have access to these voices and these perspectives, there are different ways that we can do that. One is we can send out surveys. So we do have a system of surveys already developed and available for Pennsylvania. And we have surveys that can go out to families. We have surveys that go to students. And we have surveys that go to educators. They're available in both English and Spanish. And some of them, we've had requests for other languages, so we can get them in other languages. And these are available for you. and these are on the same site, so I'm going to talk about focus groups as well. We also have protocols in place where we can hold focus groups with our educators and our students so that we can have small representative groups of people come in and just have chats about what are you seeing, what's working, what isn't working, and those kinds of things. So these are available to you on a website that we have. I'll show you the website, but we can, oh, you're not seeing this. Let me change the view. There we go. So this document, if you pull it off of the website that I'm going to show you, will give you links to these surveys that you can use to send out to your family, students, and your educators. So again, the directions are here. Like, you wouldn't share this link, but you would create your own link of these forms that you can send out. So example, I'll just show you the student survey. Give this a chance to, it's going to force a copy for you, of course. Okay, and you can see there's 14 sections of this survey, but it just asks, basic demographic information. But again, how much do you agree with the following statements? So at my high school, teachers make sure that all students are planning for life after graduation. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? Teachers work hard to make sure that all students are learning. High school is seen as preparation for the future. And again, so it goes through these sort of perception types of questions that students can give their feedback about how they feel their school experience is going. And again, similar surveys are available for parents. And then there's an educator survey. And then, as I said, there are also focus group protocols for students and educators. So let's say I want more information than just the survey that I send out. I can open up and I'll get a list of questions that we can have when we sit down with students. And what you'll see over here are their specific connections to a tool that we use in Pennsylvania that I will get to, that is a self-assessment about essential practices that we have in place. But again, these are just questions that you can sit down and have with students when you bring those representative. This is so powerful. When you get these students together in a small group, they are willing to share and they're willing to be transparent. When we were piloting this, I had an opportunity to sit with a group of elementary school students, and I thought, oh my goodness, how is this going to go? Are they really going to even be able to answer some of these questions? We got so much valuable information from the responses of these students, and they were honest. They were very respectful, and they were very honest about, this just doesn't work in our school. What can we do to change this? Or this works really great. We want to make sure this continues, and those kinds of things. So again, just showing you that we have surveys and those focus group protocols available for you. No, that's not going to go. Okay. You can invite families in for, what we used to call fireside chats, or we still do. You can do that virtually. You can do that in person when you have PTO nights or you have open house nights. You can hold forums or other activities like that to get those perspectives and that feedback so that you're hearing that voice as well. So I would challenge you to think about the typical committees that you're bringing together currently, and how would you improve those moving forward as a school planning team. Okay. So the next thing you need to do is, once you have your structures in place, you have your steering committee together, you have your leadership teams together, and you're ready to move forward, we need to assess and figure out where are our challenges or where are our barriers, and what do we need to address as a priority. So I ask you then, what data are you collecting to get that input? So it goes back to, the perception data through surveys and whatnot, but then you're also looking at your student learning data. And we're talking about both state-reported data, so those PSSA's keystones, PASAs, but then also look at the local data that you're collecting. What kinds of evidence do you have to show what's happening with your students in reading or in math or in social emotional areas perhaps? And then how is that data being utilized? Are you running through a root cause analysis to determine why students aren't attending school? So if I go back to our problem of practice and looking at attendance, I need to figure out who's not attending and work through that root cause analysis to figure out, like, why aren't kids attending? Is it because they're missing, for medical reasons, or is it because, they have to work and help support the family, or, whatever, but running through that root cause analysis to figure that out. Again, on the website that I'm going to show you, it is a website. Oh, you can't see that pop up. It's a website that is managed by IU13, but it's iu13.org/school-improvement/PA. I will take you to that and show that to you. And it will have all the tools that you will need to run through this cycle. So I think in this environment, what I'll do is kind of run through the cycle for you, and then I'll take you out to the resources so that I'm not continuously going back and forth. But again, if you're into the slide deck from the link that Erica shared with you, you can get to all of these direct links as well. And once we work through that root cause analysis and we really decide, like, here's the real challenge that we're seeing, and here's why we think it's happening. Now, what am I going to do about it? So once we've assessed those needs then I need to identify what the priorities are. A school is only going to be able to work on 2-ish priorities at any given time, like high leverage, real high need priorities. There's going to be details within that. But we need to identify those priorities that are a really high need at the time and address those. And from those priorities, identify what the goals are that we want. So I can't just write a goal that's going to say, we're going to increase our attendance rates, right? I need to make it a SMART goal that's equitable and inclusive as well. It's measurable. It's specific, so following all of those, standards for a good goal. And once I know what my goals are and what I'm trying to achieve, then I really need to know, like, how am I going to get there? So what are my action steps going to look like? What change will we put into place? Because obviously what's working or what we have in place now isn't working. We need to change something. So what are we going to change? And what's that going to look like? I'm relying on evidence-based strategies that I know are where the evidence is based in the context that I have. So I'm not going to look at a high school strategy if I'm in an elementary school. And I might not get the best results from a strategy that shows evidence for 4th through 6th graders in a very rural, small community if I'm coming from a district like Reading or Allentown or Philadelphia, right? It's a very different context. So we also have, and this one I will take you out. Let me just get a second to grab the link here. So we also have a website in Pennsylvania that was developed by part of our school improvement state team. And it's called Pennsylvania Evidence Resource Center. So you're going to find that this is very similar to other clearinghouses, like the What Works Clearinghouse, or in those other types of places. But this website is organized specific to indicators in Pennsylvania. So for example, as I scroll down, at the top there's always going to be some highlighted resources for you. So again, you can see the featured area right now is student attendance. And it often is, because that's a huge area that many of our schools are trying to work through right now, is how to increase their attendance rates. And then one that is very popular that people are pinning a lot, or they're looking at a lot, is the use of an early warning system. So if you're not familiar with that, you can go in and take a look at what an early warning system is. And then it'll also highlight some new strategies that might have been added. So in this particular case, it's early college high schools. So as I scroll down, I'm going to see that I have strategies organized by Future Ready PA indicators. So when you get onto that Future Ready PA site, you're going to see again achievement and growth for English language arts, for math, and for science or biology. And then you're also going to see graduation, you're going to see attendance, you're going to see the career standards benchmarks, you're going to see language for your English learners and whatnot. So that's how this particular section is organized. And I can choose any one of these tiles. If I just hover over it, it's going to give me an idea of what I'm going to find in those in that section. And as I scroll down, I'm also going to see these strategies organized by academic area. So if I'm looking for strategies that are specific to science, I can choose that tile. If I'm looking for technology and digital literacy, I can come over and choose that tile and enter the strategies. Or I can find strategies organized by learning environment. So if I'm looking for social emotional wellness strategies, or if I'm looking for strategies to engage families and community members, I can find those as well. And then there's strategies for educators and staff. So let me just give you a quick insight into what you'll see when you get in there. So I just went into the English language arts tile, and I can find strategies like texting with parents. And it's going to give me an overview of that strategy. It's going to tell me where the research was done. So this particular strategy was researched in urban settings in grades kindergarten and 6 through 12. It's going to tell me which evidence levels of ESSA this meets. So this falls at tiers 1 through 4. And then the outcomes that they saw. And I can then enter, you can see as I hover over, I can enter this and get more information about what this particular strategy is. Okay. So again, down here, I'm going to see all of the reading strategies that have some evidence behind them. Okay. So a really nice website. Let me go down and get to where I am here. There we go. Okay. So again, I want to get you out to some of those. So once I have decided on the strategies and the interventions that I'm going to put into place, then I want to know, are they working? So I have to monitor those over time. In our cycles, we have our CSI schools monitor biweekly and monthly and quarterly. So at a biweekly level, our local, like our school-based implementation teams, our data teams are getting together. So I might have a team that looks at reading or English language arts. They get together and look at their implementation on a biweekly basis. I might have, if I'm working on math strategies, I might have my math team and data team come together, and they're looking at the math implementation biweekly. So it's those local school-based teams that are meeting biweekly and reporting progress. On a monthly basis, those implementation teams are reporting out to the larger school leadership team. So that's going to include our building administrators and whatever other leaders. So it might be learning coaches or instructional coaches. It might be Title I teachers. They're going to be grade level representatives in those meetings as well. And then at our quarterly meetings, that's a chance for the school to report out to their larger community. So to their school board, to their district level administration, to their community members, the impact of their plans and what's happening with those. So we have routines that are already, again, you can access and are already available to you to help run through these monitoring procedures. But I need to look. So going back to the vision, what was our vision for our school? And what are our belief systems about that? And if I tie that directly to attendance, what is it that we were really trying to achieve in focusing on that attendance practice or problem of practice? And I want to know, are we having an impact? Are the strategies that we're putting into place having an impact on attendance rates for the groups of students that we were targeting? And then looking at if the implementation is working, what can we do to sustain this over time and continue to make these improvements? And if it isn't, what adjustments do we have to make in order to get the outcomes that we wanted? Okay, so these continuous sort of routines that we're running to gauge impact will help us make those instructional decisions as we move forward. Okay. Okay, so I do want to take you out. Let me take you out to some of these websites that I promised you. So one of the ones that I was talking about is the IU13. Okay. Let me try it this way. So when I get on the landing page for this site, you're going to see two things. I'm going to see a link here for human capital resources. So if you are working with attract, prepare, retain teachers, and you need some staffing suggestions and you need some support in that area, you can try that link. What I'm looking at are this Pennsylvania Continuous Improvement Resources. So again, this is open source for all schools and districts to move through. And what you can see is over here on the right-hand side is my menu. So I have Ready, Set, Go. The Ready, Set, Go sections follow the Pennsylvania school plan. So if you're a Title I school, you're completing that school plan. All schools are completing a comprehensive plan at some point. It's going to follow the same Ready, Set, Go. If your school is in school improvement, they're all the same plan. So you're going to find that planning template. So this is how it's sort of divided in here, but it follows that same cycle of continuous improvement that I was talking about. So under the Ready section, I'm going to find tools and resources for how I establish these leadership and teaming structures, how we create a vision, how we put together our steering committee, who should be on that steering committee. So each of these individual tabs, I can pull down and get more information and additional links for those. Okay. As I go down, here are some protocols if you're looking for how to run those teams, how to set norms, for example. And then there are some toolkits available as well. So for example, the handout that you have is the cycle of improvement. I can go in and if you want to see that digitally or you want to display that or share that with somebody, I can go right in there and get that. Okay. Most of the pages will also have a learning modules piece. So I can go in and find learning modules directly related to this set part of the cycle. So what does the continuous improvement process in Pennsylvania look like? And you can go in and find a learning module. These are self-directed. Some of them, they're meant to be not take up too much time. And I can just go in really easily and start the course. And sometimes there are audio files. Sometimes there are just some items to read. Sometimes there will be videos to go with these. So this one I can just click on, it says I have an audio file in here. I can click on the audio file and listen to that. There's information to read under here. Once I get through, I can pull down all of these and find more information about what does adjusting the course mean? What does it look like? And once I finish that lesson, I can go to lesson 2 and just continue to work through. Okay. So each page is going to have, no, wrong one. Go back here. It's just going to require me to backtrack all the way out of there. Okay, so they're going to have those learning modules. And I can go through some of the things I wanted to, back to the main menu. Under assessing the needs, this is where you can find those surveys and focus group protocols. So right under protocols, I can see PDF versions of all of those surveys that I was talking about with you, and I showed you the student survey. And the document that I showed you where you can grab those direct links are the ATSI survey tools. So you can go right in and get the focus group protocols, the links to that, and the surveys as well. I also talked to you about something, a facilitated self-assessment. and it had 18 conditions of learning. So this is called the essential practices for schools and communities. So if you don't know where to start, in terms of identifying, really understanding what your needs are, you can go in as a school team and you can complete this self-assessment. So under here, there are 4 conditions: empowering leadership, fostering quality professional learning, a focus on continuous improvement of instruction and student-centered supports, and these are the essential practices under each of those that you would be assessing. So there's a whole rubric and a document that you can also pull down from the site that can help you just assess what those needs are. And again, learning modules under there. So this website and the evidence in Pennsylvania websites are where you can go and get all of these sort of continuous resources for this continuous cycle of improvement that you want to engage in. And then for the systems conditions pieces of the toolkit, just like Erica went through with you, the scaffolded supports, you're going to find the same sort of webinars and whatnot for systems conditions that you can access from the PDE toolkit page, and you can watch more information about that also. Okay. So what questions can I answer for you? Some of you are familiar with this cycle, some not. Are there any questions that you have that I can clarify? Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn it, I think, over to Amy. Yeah. Let me pull this back up for you.
Okay, so Erica mentioned about the scaffolded supports earlier. So we're going to go back into the scaffolded supports and kind of look at that just a little bit more closely, and you'll see that, like she said, a lot of it is what you'll see within MTSS, and some things should look pretty familiar. So just this whole set of slides here is also within the resources that she shared in those webinars and the PDFs. It's kind of lifted right from that, so you can always access. All of them are very descriptive of what they what's included in scaffolded supports. So this is just kind of the intent. Overall, scaffolded supports is there so we can look at the academics, the behavior, the social emotional, and really just how are we providing all of this for all of our students, and through that equitable lens, through that trauma-informed lens. And so these are the 7 components within scaffolded supports. And these were the same ones that she showed in the toolkit that were each of those sections that has that checklist that goes with them. So the first one here, accelerated learning through universal supports, we're thinking about, again, core instruction. And the second one, addressing that core learning landscape through explicit instruction. Explicit instruction is a huge piece of that. Number 3, the class-wide interventions and supports. So you can see those first 3 are really focusing on what are we doing in core? What does that tier 1 look like that we're doing for all students? And then into number 4, now we're looking more at our tiers of instruction and how are we providing that strategic and intensive support. Number 5, accessing the additional accelerated learning experiences. She explained those a little bit with our summer programs and tutoring, and those additional things that we might do outside of the school day. Number 6, then, are other populations, and 6 and 7 that are on the other ends of the continuum, right? We're always like, okay, well, here's our middles, but what are we doing then to address our accelerated or gifted advanced learners, and what are we doing to support our students with more significant learning disabilities or behavioral needs? Okay, so each of these slides, and I'm not going to read this because this is a lot of words for you to look. You get the general idea for each of these here. So we can kind of look at what are those key components? I just want to pick out just a couple things, but I want you to be thinking about, because this is what we're going to have some conversation here, is what are the things that we're doing well? What are our successes? Whether you know of the scaffolded supports or not, there's things that you're doing already in your schools that are positive things that address these. So what are some of your successes? What are some of your challenges with these? And then maybe you know some tips and tricks that we can share with each other as well. All right, so the first one, again, accelerating learning through foundational supports. So again, you can see looking at strategies through equity, student engagement. You see explicit instruction as part of that. And as you look down through those bullets, identifying strategies to ensure flexible options for students to demonstrate what they know and what they've learned, and strategies to interact with the content. So think about universal design for learning. How are we making sure all students have access to the resources, to the curriculum, and in equitable manner? All right, there's more about foundational supports. You kind of just scan through that. I think a big one there to look at, it mentions about our English learners, and I know that's another area that has shown up when Karen's talking about our school improvement plans. We're seeing a lot of districts that are now being identified because of their English learners, and then also students with disabilities. So really thinking how we're addressing all of our students. That last bullet then, providing structured routines, and that's another big one, I believe. Okay, and then here's some, when you look at that second bullet there, just considering some other aspects there. How are we making them predictable structural routines, clear, consistent, positive behavioral expectations? So if you're familiar with PBIS, right, you'll see some of that kind of embedded in here, right? So it's all the same, the same things that you might just have different language for when we talk about like MTSS and PBIS. All right, and this one is more looking at then that universal core landscape. So how are we aligning our processes through that cycle where we're going to assess, analyze, interpret, instruct, reflect, monitor, to provide, again, explicit instruction. And we know how important explicit instruction is. And identifying essential components of instruction in explicit instruction. And then that last bullet, that might look familiar to many of you as well, that I do, we do, you do, right? That's part of explicit instruction, that gradual release of responsibility model. And doing that within not just academics, but we're doing that within behavior, we're doing that within our social emotional instruction competencies as well. So class-wide supports, this is one that is coming up a lot more lately, which is great. What are some of those things that we do or we can do to address the needs of most of our students? So if we're thinking about that tier 1, and we need to be hitting, 80% of our students, if we're not, we don't have the time and the resources to be doing tons of intervention, right? If we have too many kids in intervention, we need to look at how are we addressing things in our tier 1 and in our core. So we can look at more of a class-wide support and do class-wide interventions. And so there's lots of ways that we can do that. And one of the most popular ones, and there's some of the groups that we're talking about today, reading literacy is my background, so I always fall to literacy. Erica's a math girl. But how can we do things like partner reading intervention, looking at our entire second grade class? There's some really good interventions and protocols for those. The strategic and intensive supports, we said now we're moving up that that triangle, looking more at our tier 2 and tier 3, and ensuring that we are aligning the things that we're doing throughout those tiers. And making sure that when we are doing that, we're thinking about the skills that the students are working on, but also keeping the language consistent throughout of our tiers. So you can tell there's a lot that's in here that you can kind of pick through, right? Accelerated learning opportunities. This is the one we said about tutoring and summer school options and summer learning options. So that first bullet, just looking more at that database decision making through that lens, so we can make sure that we are putting things into place, not maybe what we've always done, but what is best for the students who are most at risk that we can address through those other ways. So you'll see in there's those English language learners popping up again in there, making sure we have ongoing assessment for our English language learners, and having that infrastructure for professional collaboration that centers around them as well. And I do like that last bullet too, if that's something that we're trying to, many districts are trying to reach out to their local universities and creating more partnerships to help out with this, because things like tutoring and after school programs and summer school, we have teacher shortages happening during the school year. Sometimes it's really hard to have the personnel to support that, so we really want to make sure that we're building strong partnerships with our community and our universities and others to kind of really support and help out with that. And then our students with more significant learning and behavioral needs, again, we really want to look at that data, make sure that we are aligning with what those needs are. And a big one there, of course, is going to be professional development and training. And throughout everything we've been talking today, you have Patton and you have your local IUs that can support you in all of these. As I mentioned, I am the IU state lead for Scaffolded Supports, but there is an IU lead in every IU for Scaffolded Supports, for systems condition, for each area of accelerated learning, as well as the supports that we have at Patton. So there's somebody that you can reach out to, that your school can reach out to help in all of these. Because we know how big professional development is. That's our life. And then the last one is all about our gifted learners. And this is an area that is coming up so much more now, is okay, well, what do we do for those students that are our more advanced learners and our gifted learners? So we do want to take a look at that and look at our data and think more about how can we differentiate for them. And all of these really, if you go back to one of the first bullets about universal design for learning and having equitable practices, it all makes sure that we're doing something across the board for all of our learners. Okay, so that's kind of like the really short version of all that, because that is a lot for you to kind of go through. And like I said, Erica pointed out those resources. You can take each one of those areas, and there is a webinar video for every single one of them. You said, what 15, 20 minutes, right? So you could just select one. Hey, I want to focus on this, whether it's as a teacher, whether it's at a school, at a district, and kind of think through those a little bit more. But we want to have some time for you all to think about that, explore resources, and also kind of share some of these things. So as we've gone through this, and I know we're a small group, but please feel free to share. What are some successes that you have seen? What are some challenges that you have seen? And do you have any tips? Because we'll take tips and we'll share tips, but you guys are the ones in the field doing the work on a day-to-day basis, or you're running schools that your teachers are doing that. You have the strategies and the tips at hand. So I think we were going to chart, but I think because we're small, we can just have some open conversation if you guys are comfortable with that. But we'd love to hear from all of you. So I'm going to kind of just throw it out there to you all. What are some of your thinkings? And just kind of let this guide that. But if you have other thoughts, please share that as well.
So I'm at Wellsboro, and although we don't have, we are not on for school improvement, we do receive Perkins, so we do not have a career technical center within like an hour and a half.
Okay.
Kids would be on the bus for 3 hours. So anyway, we do programs we have 6 programs of study at our school. So anyway, we get letters that we have improvements needed for that. So you use the same cycle, use the same ideas. And so right now we're on for achievement in keystones in literature and algebra. So instead of just doing just literature and algebra, I'm doing all of them. Why would I leave one content out? And so I have someone coming in, but then they got sick, so I let it anyway. I use their stuff. I have to start moving now in the year in order to affect its year long, the end. And keystones are kind of tough. It's not like dealing with PSSA, which is all across the grade. So when you're trying to fix things there, it's a little bit easier. Keystones, they could be a retester. There's a lot going on. They could have passed Mod 1, but not Mod 2. So and it's just high school all over the place. So it's a little bit harder to put your finger on. You can't just go MTSS. It doesn't quite work like that in a high school schedule. So it's a little more complex. But what I'm doing is every month I am meeting with the teachers and doing 2 hours, and I already met with them in October, and we're starting off looking at your data from last time, because I'm just going to make one complaint. I'll try not to make any more, but data to me around here is like an autopsy. Like, it's so slow to get your data, meaning I'm looking at 2023. If I had that data a little faster, the cycle could move a little faster. The other complexity with data is that your keystones are not put all together by a cohort. So you're going to collect by administration to put together your entire cohort. So that makes data a little more complex. But anyway, I'm giving them their growth, their achievement, breaking it down by subgroups, giving them their projections and all that data. And I'm trying really hard not to jump and give my analysis of it. It's that data conversation. What do you think? What do you think? And we have a plan that we use in a Google Docs with what's our 30-day plan, what's our 60-day plan, what's our 90-day plan. And I'm having them all look at each other's. So my literature person might have a similar strategy as my algebra person. There might be something similar. So I make it available. They can all see all of them. And I'm asking them to fit, what are you really going to do and who's responsible in 30, 60, 90? And one of the things, too, we talked about is we really need to look at how we're administering it. Maybe what we're doing that, maybe even after we do all this work, let's talk about how we should do that. So that's more than 90. But anyway, I'm trying to get them to put it on paper. And then we're re-meeting in November and re-meeting in December and re-meeting in January. I am pulling them out, getting subs. So this is like my classroom teachers and my special education teachers that support the keystones and really trying to move the needle so that we can get away from our improvement letter. That's pretty common in Perkins, but I'm using the fact that I got this letter to say, we got a letter, we got to work on this. I mean, I just keep it really simple.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. That you are on track. That's a great.
When I can keep my mouth shut, and I like to analyze data, so that's what makes it hard.
Yeah.
When you like that, you want to jump to it, but you're
Not
teaching
everyone
them
does.
nothing. So I really have to tell myself to do that, even though I have documents to walk them, like I give them that. And what I learned is in literature, my core teacher that teaches most of it, she knows her data. So if we don't sit back, like you could have made the assumption that she didn't. She really can when put in that environment and knows her data. Which just kind of put it on the spot, making the time to do it, because collaboration time is hard to find in high school, maybe in many places.
Yeah, and it's really hard when you really love data to sit back and stay quiet. Yeah. But you start to see how much they really understand and the supports that they need with analyzing that data as well, and how important that is for those decisions. I love it. Like, kudos to you. That is great. Yeah. Thank you. You guys have anything you want to add to that?
One of the things when we think about secondary schools, achievement data are relatively stable. So you can look at some existing data from a resource allocation standpoint. So like looking at PSSA scores, for example, or previous year scores, unless something really substantial has happened, those achievement levels are going to remain relatively consistent. One of the reports that we often look at working with teams is the quintile diagnostic summary, and it chunks it looks at the distribution of students and what percent of students are performing in the first and second quintiles, and that can help you from a resource allocation standpoint, because it does take a while to get those new data. But one thing about achievement is it's going to be really rare to see a student who is performing in the first quintile, then the next year in the fifth quintile. There's not really significant movement. So those are kind of some other things you can look at to front load it a little bit while you're waiting for the new data, to look at those, at least those achievement groups, when you think about how are we going to allocate resources. Do we need to do things like double blocks or, schedule an intervention block? Those things you need to think about the year before, essentially. So that can be another source of data. I too like data, so I appreciate that.
Our kids are coming in primed and ready from middle school, and the data projections, sharing the projection. I think sharing the projection with the teachers, they didn't ever have those. And I just went and put them all in and asked them to be sensitive, to not be throwing their emails around. Like, you got to tell them that sometimes, because it can hurt their feelings. Data can be sensitive, but they had not had the projections, and I think that's beneficial for them, because middle school is succinctly down there, and then they aren't getting that information. I do think if I were to add one more piece, I would add a piece of having the middle school, like English teacher, coming up and sitting in our meeting with the high school teachers for the curriculum type of conversation. If I were to add a piece, that's what I would do. And same with the other areas.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking at you guys. Go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. So, I know, coming from Susquehanna Township, I know we both come from Susquehanna Township, and we're very middle school. Mm-hmm. So we are our own kind of monster at the middle school. We are definitely not the high school, and we are definitely not elementary. So we kind of have our own different challenges. I know, some of our successes, I know our staff is for the most part, everyone is, I think, on board with wanting to do different things and wanting to try different scaffolds and different supporting systems and everything. The challenge is just kind of what you were saying, getting that time and that implementation to make sure that everyone is on the same page. We have data out the ear. We have formative assessments, informal assessments, summative assessments, map testing assessments, PSSA assessments, keystone assessments. We have Acadians assessment. We have everything that we could possibly use, but it's just getting the staff together and training them on how to appropriately interpret that data that's probably one of the biggest challenges with getting our scaffolds in place.
Yeah, that is, it's hard. It's hard. And that's something, I know my team has worked with, I say your team has worked with the middle school Susquehanna a lot in the past, but that's something that we can also help support you with too. Sometimes when you have a lot of data, sometimes there's too much data, right? And so we even suggest doing like a data inventory. What is the purpose of everything we're doing? Because sometimes we'll see that we're doing 2 or 3 assessments for the same purpose, and is that really necessary? So that kind of can help too. So we're not on that data overload. But we hear that from schools often, where we have all this data, but now what do we do with it? Because not everybody understands what to do or how to look at it or how to read this report. Or Acadians has like 100 reports. What's the best one for us to look at? So there's a lot, and that's just one assessment. That's in all of them. So.
I teach social studies, so we're already right there. Like we in social studies, like I know our math people, they have data out, like Excel sheets after Excel sheet after Excel sheet. Well, this looks at this, looks at this, looks at this. ELA, kind of the same thing. Well, this is reading, lexile, this, vocab acquisition, and then science now being tested. They have NGSS and all this, and then I'm like, social studies. Like, we have Common Core.
Right, you're right.
I can, like, even for myself, like there are tons of things like that myself and the social studies team, like we've talked about, like, well, we want to assess and use data appropriately in a social studies setting. So that means, well, we need to look at not only the skills, but also then the content that we're developing these good citizenship skills in students. But then it's, okay, well, where do we get the help from? Because again, like, it is social studies and it's not a tested subject. Like I said, the only standards that we have are the Common Core, the state standards for history. They're from way back in 2009. So it's just that, like, where do we fit into everything with scaffolding supports? I mean, we take, our math classes, we have, our enrichment level, we have our intensive level, we have like our middle ground level. Same thing for kind of ELA, science, they're kind of getting there. And then social studies, we're like, I have kids who are gifted in the same class as kids who have, some of the most severe IEPs in the same class. Mm-hmm. And so it's really that struggle for, okay, well, how do I get the data? How can I interpret the data? But then how can I fully implement those support systems to such a wide-ranging class of, 30 plus students in the same room?
Yeah. And how important is social studies? I mean, it's the content, right? The content that's showing up in all of those others that if we don't have you, they don't understand anything in the others, right? I mean, I'm very elementary literacy, but I know that if my kids are reading a 3rd grade PSSA passage and have no idea about that content, and it's a social studies content that they never received and learned about, they're not going to do well, right? Because they've never had that. But it's easily something that gets pushed away because of what you're saying, that what's the data that's linked to that.
In my classes, I have kids who are taking algebra and geometry, and at the same time, I have kids who are at a 3rd grade math level who are learning addition and subtraction. Mm-hmm. And then that's just with math. In ELA, I have kids who are taking, high school 9th grade level ELA classes, and then I have other kids who are still at a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. So it's like, okay, well, and I have kids who are obviously, L support who speak very little English. We're Susquehanna Township. We are the #1 most diverse school district in the state of Pennsylvania. We have kids who speak Arabic, Spanish, Nepali. Pretty much, just throw a dart, we get them, and it's rough to determine what scaffolds are appropriate and to whom they're appropriate for.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if you had a chance, it was recorded yesterday, but as I think about what you're saying about meeting the needs of students with disabilities, students who are typical performers, students who are advanced performers, in scaffolded supports, we call it like the core landscape. There was a great session yesterday that goes a little bit more in depth. I don't know if you got to see Dr. Dave Eddyburn. So I think like some of the strategies that he had in that session, I'm thinking like the tic-tac-toe board, for example, might be something to go revisit, like access for all and some of those. Technology is not my thing, but in scaffolded supports, it's a very, very high level in those core. But as I'm listening to you and like the importance of social studies, but yet how do we do, intensive interventions in social studies, right? I think of that kind of across the continuum as probably some resources that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I reached out to him last.
Oh, wonderful. Great minds think alike. But I was thinking like that's so wonderful for teachers of different content areas and doing some of those choice and some of the things too, like the different like text readers or text shrinkers, like perfect stuff. Then kids might be accessing it more. So yeah.
All right. Anything else? Oh, thank you. Thank you both for sharing. That's great. I don't know. Are we? Okay. Well, because we're at the end, so we can keep the conversation going. So just wanted to kind of think this last part here, now that we've shared a lot of these resources. And this is more of a reflection, but please, if you have some thoughts, share out. What is your plan for moving forward here? If you're new to the things that we've shared, maybe you just need to take it back, explore, spend some time, take it back to certain people within your districts, or if you have been familiar, is there something that you want to look at a little bit more deeper? So what is your plan, or what is your next step for implementation of maybe one of the things that we've talked about today to help accelerate student learning? So, and I'll kind of throw it to you guys if you want to say something out, but again, if this is also kind of a reflective piece as well. Sure.
So I'll just share, I work with school teams, K through 12, and just thinking that for my own personal use, spending some time to explore the resources. I know they're out there, I don't know them as in depth as you three, but I know they're available. But just thinking when someone asks a question, like I could refer to this and say, you know what, let's go to that toolkit. Let's see if there's something in there that maybe I'm not thinking about. Or, just as simple as something like, do we have a good teaming structure in place? Let's just double check that we have all the necessary stakeholders. Maybe I'm missing something that I'm kind of stuck in my typical rut. I think about the same things all the time. This would just be a great tool for me. And for all of us, I think, when we work with a variety of groups, just to have access to and remember, let me just go check that. There might be a resource or a link to something in there that's going to take me down the right path instead of me searching and asking people and going down 3 or 4 rabbit holes. Well, now I have a vetted source for links and a vetted source for resources and a vetted, opportunities to really take teams in the right direction versus me kind of veering all over because I'm not quite sure how to answer them. So I just think it's an overall useful toolkit, as it's mentioned, as it's named, for doing things of that nature. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. Yeah, I would go back, I would bookmark it, and like how she said, when you're in those situations, here, let's pull that up before we need to go out and Google everything and start finding all these resources. All of them have been pulled for you already right here. So, yeah. All right, well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us and being so open and honest and willing to share. We really appreciate you being here and your time today. Thank you as well.